Good morning. Ṣāliḥ al-Kuwaytī shared a lifelong career in music with his brother Dawood al-Kuwaytī. It was Ṣāliḥ, though, who composed most of the music and was the director of the Radio Iraq ensemble. The songs he composed are regarded by listeners, musicians, and authors as Iraqi heritage. This is an urban genre in terms of the lyrics, rhythms, forms, and use of melodic modes, although the topics of the lyrics are similar to those of Abudiyat and Pastat, namely the trials and tribulations of love, Azab al-Hub, and they are in the Muslim Baghdadi dialect. His work is also described by musicians and musicologists as innovative and influential. When asked many years later, after he left Iraq, what made him so successful, Ṣāliḥ al-Kuwaytī replied that he composed music from the audience spirit, لحنت من روح الشعب. Now, sha'ab also means a people or a nation, and it's a big question what he meant, whether he meant an audience or a nation. I think he meant audience. He also said, and now I'm more interested in the second part of his reply, he also said that his innovations were introduced gradually rather than suddenly or surprisingly. He used the word mufajia. This echoes the rhetoric of the Iraqi authorities at the time. According to some historians, such as Noga Efrati, they were worried of a reaction that might overthrow them if the process was too quick. If indeed Ṣāliḥ al-Kuwaytī was aware of this approach and adopted it to his music, it shows him as part of the cultural elite that aspired to modernize Iraq and was aware of the potential resistance of the population. I would like to show the ways in which Ṣāliḥ al-Kuwaytī and Dawood al-Kuwaytī embody the gradual transition from the Ottoman period to modern Iraq in their biography and in the songs of Ṣāliḥ al-Kuwaytī. Around 1918, when Ṣāliḥ was 10 and Dawood was 8, they started to learn to play music. Ṣāliḥ took up the violin and Dawood played the oud. Already by looking at their music education, can we see their position at the turning point from the traditional to the modern. On the one hand, they learned Khaliji songs, that is songs from the Gulf area, through sessions with Khaled al-Bakr, the Kuwaiti oud player. There were no institutions of music education at the time in Iraq or in Kuwait, and those who wanted to learn music as a hobby did so by joining a competent player and emulating him. Professional musicians learned as apprentices or from their elder family members. On the other hand, the brothers also learned by listening to records. They listened to Egyptian and Iraqi music and possibly to European art music too. This was a new, modern technology and a new means of learning music. The brothers' talent enabled them to play what they heard. And by the way, Kulthum, the contemporary Egyptian renowned singer, also combined learning from her father with learning from records, which she found at her school friend's house. The next stage in the brothers' career after performing in Iraq took place in Basra and in other locations in Iraq. In the late 1920s, they played the Iraqi Maqam, accompanying Muhammad al-Qubanchi and other Maqam reciters. Here you see a picture of an old Chalri band, that is the ensemble that accompanies the Iraqi Maqam. So again, on the one hand, this repertoire was a classical genre which changed very little for at least several decades prior to the birth of Ṣāliḥ and Dawood al-Kuwaytī. On the other hand, the brothers performed the maqam with new instrumentation. This lineup for the Iraqi Maqam was introduced in the late 20s by Muhammad al-Kuwaytī, the Iraqi Maqam reciter whom they accompanied. So you can see here the Takht, the new ensemble, and here the old Chalri on the other side. We will just listen to a short excerpt of Iraqi Maqam. So this was Filfil Gurji. And after we looked at aspects of the brothers' position between the traditional and the modern, I will ask, what roles had the brothers in the modernization of Iraq? So first, they recorded Kuwaiti songs in Basra in the 1920s. Later, from 1930 onwards, the brothers recorded their own songs with female singers. You can see here some of the record companies at the time. You see the Baidaphone, the Lebanese company, with the gazelle as logo. That was their reply to the dog of his master's voice. And here it says Saleh Ezra al-Kuwaytī singing the song Fi Hawa Badri Wazeni. And then we have Bahrain phone with the alligator. And then we have Chakmakchi, which recorded a bit later in the late 40s, but look where they pressed the records. They were pressed in Sweden and in Greece. And I suspect, I'm trying to find out now whether it was the Swedish branch of the Dangur family who was responsible for this connection with Sweden. These were not the first music recordings in Iraq, but it was still a novelty, and that's why I mentioned this in the context of the brothers. The brothers were also active in the nightclub scene in Baghdad. Alongside coffee houses, nightclubs contributed to the development of the new Iraqi song. The brothers settled in Baghdad in 1930 and began to play at Al-Hilal nightclub, where Salima Pasha, who was Jewish, was the singer. Clubs of this kind were called hotel in the Jewish dialect, or malha or cabaret in the Muslim dialect. Salah and Dawood al-Kuwaytī were by no means the only composers of new Iraqi songs in the first half of the 20th century. Alongside them were the Maqam reciter Muhammad al-Kuwaytī, who composed and performed new songs during the 1930s, and the Jewish musicians Azuri, Ezra Aharon, who immigrated to Palestine in 1934, the qanun player Yusuf Zarour, the violinist Daoud Akram, Salim Zibli, the oud and violin player Salim Daoud Cohen, and the nai player Yaqub Murad al-Imari. The brothers also learned music notation around 1931-1933. This was uncommon among players of Iraqi and Arabic music at the time. They also transcribed abudiyat, that is plural of abudiya, it's a rural Iraqi genre. Their motivation for notating abudiyat is not clear. Did they have an awareness of national Iraqi music to be documented and preserved, as did composers and musicologists in Europe during the early years of nation states? They also opened a music school in 1931 at a time when apprenticeship and informal music education were still the norm. They followed Yusuf Habib's school in 1928. Yusuf Habib was a Jew who moved from Aleppo. And only later, the Iraq Music Institute was opened in 1936. Ṣāliḥ al-Kuwaytī composed in 1947 the music and 8 songs for the film Aliyah wa Awasum, the first feature film to be produced in Iraq. The Egyptian film industry changed Middle Eastern music already in the 1930s in terms of the length and the instrumentation of the songs, for example. This was the first time, however, that Iraqi audiences experienced Iraqi songs in a feature film. The brothers established the music ensemble for Radio Iraq, following a request from the Minister of Education, Wazir al-Ma'arif, Sadiq al-Bassam, when the radio was inaugurated in 1936. Ṣāliḥ al-Kuwaytī was the ensemble director and was also responsible for music programs in the radio, except for Iraqi Maqam broadcasts. He assembled the qanun player Yusuf Za'arur, whom you can see here playing the qanun, nai player Yaqub Murad al-Imari, and percussionist Hussein Abdallah, alongside Dawood al-Kuwaytī on oud and Salah himself as violinist and director. The cello player Ibrahim Qazzaz, or Ibrahim Taqu, joined after a year or two. The brothers' central role in the radio put them at the heart of several processes. First, incorporating the nai and cello in the ensemble was an innovation for Iraqi music, although the cello might have been introduced earlier by Azuri. Ensembles of modern music, namely not maqam, in Iraq before the 1930s included the violin, the oud, percussion, and sometimes the qanun. The radio ensemble was not a firqa compared with Egypt at the time, but it was a modernized ensemble compared with the chalghi, the traditional Iraqi Maqam ensemble. The second point I would like to address, Radio Iraq contributed to the transformation of Iraq into a nation state by broadcasting Iraqi Maqam, Rifi songs, that is rural songs, alongside newly composed songs by Ṣāliḥ al-Kuwaytī and his contemporaries. The radio played an important part in the dissemination and heritageization of these new songs. Michael Frischkopf discusses the irony in the nostalgic view of old classical genres from the pre-mediated era. He suggests that it was precisely the records and radio broadcasts that made these songs canonical. Radio Iraq also contributed to the transformation of music into a respectable profession, and I follow here Sami Zubaydah. It also contributed to the conceptualization of the composer in the shift from an oral tradition that focuses on the performer to the modern world of royalties. The brothers also learned music from different parts of Iraq and then strived to play regional music on the radio. Can this exposure of regional music on the national radio station indicate an awareness of national Iraqi music and an effort to document and preserve it, as European ethnomusicologists did in the time when nation-states were constructed? Finally, I would like to show how Ṣāliḥ al-Kuwaytī combined the old and the new in the songs he composed. Most of the songs which Ṣāliḥ al-Kuwaytī composed were in the Iraqi Muslim Baghdadi dialect and in melodic modes which were common in Iraq. So in that they were traditional. He used, however, composition techniques that were new in Iraq, and in that they were innovative. He composed instrumental pieces such as Sama'i, Longa, and Bashraf, which were not common in Iraq, but in typical Iraqi melodic modes, such as Lami and Panjiga. He composed intros and interludes to pastat. The pasta is a light song inserted within the Iraqi Maqam, thus turning them into independent songs, separate from the Iraqi Maqam. He composed songs in a variety of melodic modes, including those that were not common in Iraq, such as bastanigar and zangiran. And I follow here Mehiman al-Jazrawi, who pointed this out, who mentioned this as innovations. He composed for some of the songs an intro, an interlude different from the song's melody, as opposed to an instrumental intro in the song's melody. This shows his awareness of musical form. He composed for some of the songs an intro in a rhythm different from the rhythm of the song. And again I follow here al-Jazrawi, who pointed this out. And we will hear two such songs in a moment. The last point, he used texts voicing the distressing reality of women's subordination. Was the topic of women's emancipation in songs innovative? Was it subversive? Sami Zubaydah mentions the song Shagul ala Haddi, which we will hear, and writes that, quote, the theme of girls going to school and the perceived incongruities arising from that became a common motif of song and humor in the earlier decades of the 20th century, end of quote. If you have more examples of such songs, I would be glad to hear in the coffee break, please. So this is Shagul ala Haddi. It's a young woman who says, I am pretty, I'm educated, I went to school, I learned arithmetic and geometry, and now my husband took another wife, and she's also pretty and educated. So the content of the song was novel. The melodic mode, zangiran, was unfamiliar in Iraqi music. The intro is in one rhythmic cycle, and the song is in Georgina, another rhythmic cycle. Let me sing for you just the beginning of the song. شقول على حظي أنا لبنية شقول على حظي أنا لبنية رجلي تزوج فوق راسي مراية رجلي تزوج فوق راسي مراية رجلي تزوج فوق راسي ضرة شلون هالعيشة هالمرة رجلي تزوج فوق راسي ضرة شلون هالعيشة هالمرة مثلي حلوة وشاطرة وهم حرة مثلي حلوة وشاطرة وهم حرة بالحسين أشبه مثل حورية بالحسين أشبه مثل حورية. And another song of this type, thank you. Another song which we will hear in the voice of Salima Pasha is Ana Lihdatha bint al-Faqir. So again, this is a very young woman, a girl, the daughter of a poor man, and she said, this is my fate. They married me off to an old man who is also sick, on top of everything. And you will hear in the beginning of the recording, they announce it's Ustuanat Sodwa. So Sodwa was the record company, and it's Sit Salima Pasha. And again, the intro is in one rhythmic mode, and the song itself is in another, in the Georgina. And again, the content is novel. coffee break. Conclusions. In this presentation, I try to show that musical, technological, and social factors contributed to the long-lasting popularity and appreciation of these songs. I suggest that one of the factors is that the songs are innovative on the one hand, but rooted in tradition on the other hand, and that this combination appealed to local audiences. Thank you.